The cold was the first thing. It wasn't the familiar biting Arctic wind. This was a profound internal cold that seeped into my bones, bypassed layers of thermal gear, and settled deep in my marrow. It felt alive. The year was 2005, and I worked at Aurora Station, a remote research outpost nestled on a vast, desolate ice sheet. The sun, a distant, weak orb, cast long blue shadows, struggling to pierce the perpetual twilight and offering little warmth, only a pale, indifferent light. Even light photons seemed to lose energy in this frigid, oppressive air. A faint metallic tang hung in the air, mixed with something else. It was something acrid and unsettling, like ozone after a lightning strike, or something far older. The scent clung to the back of my throat, tasting of forgotten things, of decay that was not organic, and of deep, primal fear. It was the smell of something disturbed, something dormant for millennia, perhaps since the ice first formed. Now it was slowly and inexorably stirring beneath ancient layers. This was not merely nature's cold, it was a preternatural chill, a vacuum that seemed to actively absorb all warmth, all light, and all life. The very air felt thick, heavy with unspoken dread, a tangible presence, a suffocating weight that pressed on my chest, making each breath a conscious effort. Each inhale felt like drawing ice shards into my lungs, burning with an unholy frost. I, Dr. Aris Thorne, had spent years in polar regions. As a glaciologist, I knew the ice intimately, every crevasse, every shifting flow. I understood the language of its groans and cracks. The Arctic was my laboratory, my life, a place of stark beauty and unforgiving logic, a realm where physics were laid bare, predictable and absolute. I understood its predators, polar bears, massive and powerful, but ultimately predictable in their hunger and movements, governed by instinct. The unforgiving blizzards could materialize from nowhere, a force of raw nature, but they eventually passed, leaving behind a pristine, if deadly, calm. I respected them and knew how to survive them. My knowledge was born of years of observation, of quiet patience, and of an almost instinctual connection to the frozen landscape. I could read the ice like a book. Every crack, every pressure ridge, every subtle blue vein was a sentence in its complex narrative. I could tell the age of a glacier by its blue. A deeper, more ancient hue spoke of untold millennia, of compressed time and buried secrets. I could predict a whiteout by the subtle shift in the wind, by the way the snow began to dance, a familiar prelude to a storm. But as that unnatural cold settled, a cold dread began to coil in my gut, a premonition that defied all my years of rational experience and seasoned instincts. It screamed wrong. It was a dissonant chord that disrupted the harmonious symphony of the wild, a note of pure, unadulterated terror. I was about to learn some truths that are not found in scientific journals. Some dangers are not listed in survival guides. I was about to learn that the ice was not just a place of beauty or scientific discovery. It was a place where things waited, not for prey, not for conventional sustenance, but for a moment, for a weakness, for a breach, for an unwitting invitation, a thin spot in reality's veil. And one of them, something ancient and hungry, had finally stirred. It was disturbed by our presence, by our instruments probing its depths, by the mere act of human intrusion. Its awakening was the cold itself, a cold that was not empty but pregnant with unseen menace, a profound, malevolent presence that radiated from the very heart of the frozen world, from depths far below any geological stratum. My life was the ice. From the moment I first saw the vast, desolate expanse, the scent of frozen air felt more natural than city smog. My earliest memories were of reading about polar expeditions, tales of Shackleton and Amundsen, their struggles against the elements, their triumphs of endurance. I dreamed of unexplored frontiers, of pushing human knowledge, of standing where no one had stood before. The howl of the wind was my lullaby, and the creak of shifting ice was my constant companion, a symphony of geological movement. I started as a field assistant, meticulously recording data and enduring brutal conditions fueled by a thirst for understanding. Then I worked my way up to lead researcher, entrusted with the station's most critical projects, delving into deep ice cores that held secrets from epochs past. It was a dream job, a calling. My parka was Arctic grade and perpetually dusted with frost. It felt like a second skin, a badge of honor, a symbol of my dedication. Our snowmobile, battered but reliable, its engine a familiar, comforting growl, was my vehicle, my companion, my only true connection to the outside world for weeks. Its familiar rumble was a comforting presence against the vast quiet. I preferred the predictable vastness of the ice and the quiet solitude over the chaotic unpredictability of human interaction. The ice was honest. Humans were not. The glaciers didn't lie. The blizzards didn't scheme. They simply were, immutable and grand, a pure, unadulterated force of nature, a canvas of truth. My current expedition was routine. It involved a month-long circuit of the ice sheet's most remote sectors. We deployed seismic sensors to map the subglacial topography, searching for hidden geological structures and ancient riverbeds. We collected ice core samples to unlock ancient climate secrets. Layers of trapped air and dust revealed the planet's forgotten past. We monitored glacial movement to understand global warming's effects, tracking the slow, relentless march of these frozen giants. I carried my standard gear: a well-worn backpack, a reliable GPS, a satellite phone, and a flare gun for emergencies. Every item was chosen for its dependability. Every piece had a purpose. My equipment was an extension of my scientific method, tools to quantify, to understand, to bring order to the vastness. The weather forecast had been clear, the ice stable. Everything pointed to a peaceful, uneventful journey, a simple, solitary month. It was a chance to recharge, to reconnect with Earth's primal forces, and to shed the lingering anxieties of the outside world, the petty squabbles, the endless noise of civilization. I didn't believe in ghosts, not in the traditional sense. I believed in rational explanations, in the cold, hard logic of geology, in nature's undeniable cycles. The Arctic, with its towering ice formations, pristine white expanses, and ancient whispering winds, felt less like a place of dread. It felt more like a grand, living cathedral, a testament to untamed beauty, a place of quiet reflection, a sanctuary for the soul. Its towering icebergs were silent sentinels, its frozen waters were veins of life. Its hidden ice caves were merely geological formations, beautiful, harmless, carved by natural processes. I was utterly, terrifyingly wrong. The cathedral had a crypt, and something was stirring within it, something that defied all my understanding, something that had no place in any scientific textbook, something that would shatter my very perception of reality and leave behind only fragments of what I once believed. As the days wore on, the subtle shifts began. They were so gradual at first, so easily dismissed, that I almost convinced myself I was imagining them. A product of my own isolation, or too much strong coffee, perhaps early hypothermia playing tricks on my mind, blurring reality. My GPS, usually a steadfast beacon, would occasionally glitch. Its screen flickered, displaying impossible readings. Coordinates placed me hundreds of miles away, in the ocean or deep underground. Then it settled back, as if fighting an unseen force, a subtle electromagnetic tug that defied its internal mechanics. It wasn't a total shutdown, not a full malfunction, just a slight, unnerving tremor, a silent question mark, a fleeting moment of defiance against the laws of physics. I'd tap it, reset it, try to recalibrate it, but the anomaly persisted. A tiny nagging doubt, a persistent whisper of wrongness chipped at my mind, a crack in my scientific certainty, a tear in reality's predictable fabric. I dismissed it as minor electromagnetic interference, common in polar regions, a quirk of Earth's magnetic poles. Nothing to worry about, nothing unexplainable by science. This was a comforting lie, a mantra against creeping unease, a desperate attempt to cling to the familiar, to the rational, to sanity. The wildlife began to behave strangely. Polar bears, usually solitary hunters, appeared in groups, not hunting, but just staring into the endless white. Their eyes were wide with unnatural terror, not fear of a rival or a human, but a primal, instinctual dread that seemed to emanate from the air, from the ice beneath their paws. Their bodies were rigid, their muscles trembled. They stood frozen for minutes, then bolted, not in a specific direction, but seemingly at random, crashing through snowdrifts, abandoning hunting grounds. Their survival instincts were overridden by a greater fear, something they couldn't fight, something that instilled a fear deeper than any physical threat, a fear transcending animal instincts and reaching into pure cosmic terror. Seals, usually curious and vocal, grew eerily silent. Their barks no longer echoed, their sleek bodies no longer glided. They avoided their usual breathing holes. They surfaced briefly, their eyes wide and frantic, then dived back into dark water, disappearing as if fleeing unseen horror. Their absence was more unsettling than any noise. It was as if the ice itself held its breath, waiting, watching. Its ancient, unseen eyes fixed on something I couldn't perceive, something that commanded the very creatures of the wild, something that silenced them with its mere presence, a silent, pervasive will. Then came the sounds, or rather, the absence of sounds. The Arctic, usually alive with ice creaks, wind howls, and distant animal calls, would sometimes fall into an absolute, unnatural silence. It was a vacuum that swallowed every sound, every whisper, every breath. It left a ringing emptiness in my ears. This pressed on my eardrums, a painful pressure. It felt like the air itself was sucked away, leaving me breathless and disoriented. My own footsteps, once a confident crunch, felt strangely heavy, almost sluggish, as if pushing against an unseen current. A thick, viscous resistance, like wading through unseen treacle. My hushed narrations into my handheld recorder seemed to lose their echo. They were swallowed by the suffocating quiet, dying almost immediately after leaving my lips. This left me feeling isolated, adrift in a sea of dread, even from my own voice, as if speaking was futile, a pointless defiance against an overwhelming silence. I'd hear faint, imperceptible groans from the ice beneath my feet. These sounds followed me, always just behind my line of sight. They were not the natural shifting of glaciers, not the deep, resonant groans of ice under pressure, but something deeper, more resonant, more alive. It was a sound like colossal unseen gears grinding deep within the earth, or the soft tap, tap, tap against my tent. Nothing was there when I checked. It was a rhythmic, insistent tapping, like a skeletal finger against frozen canvas. This sound seemed to come from inside the ice itself. It was a phantom knocking, a constant, maddening rhythm that tapped against my nerves, a cruel, mocking metronome counting down to something terrible. A faint, cloying scent like damp earth mixed with something metallic and sickly sweet would drift past. Then it vanished. I sniffed the air, confused. It was a taste of something foul on my tongue, something unnatural, something defying explanation. It hinted at decay deeper than mere rot, a decay of the soul, a spiritual corruption, a scent of primordial evil. I found myself whispering even when no one was near. My voice was barely audible, as if afraid to disturb something listening, something waiting patiently for me. It waited for my fear to ripen, for the perfect moment to reveal itself, to claim me, to absorb me into its ancient, silent hunger. It was a hunter, and I was its prey. One evening, I set up my temporary camp near a towering ice ridge, a landmark on my map. Its crystalline peaks glinted in the dim light. Its base was scarred by millennia of glacial movement. The air grew impossibly heavy, thick with that cloying scent, now stronger, almost suffocating. The hum, a subtle background presence, a low thrum in my bones, intensified. It vibrated through the ground beneath my sleeping bag, up through my body, rattling my teeth, shaking my entire being. An internal tremor made my very cells resonate with its alien frequency. It wasn't just a sound. It was a physical force, a pressure that squeezed my chest, making it hard to breathe, stealing air from my lungs, leaving me gasping, desperate for oxygen. It was a silent internal scream, a constant, agonizing vibration that threatened to tear me apart from the inside. The ice around my campsite began to ripple subtly, not from seismic activity, but an internal tremor. It was as if its structure convulsed, as if something vast and ancient stirred beneath the frozen surface. A profound disquiet radiated outwards, disturbing the very ice. The ice crystals on the ridge began to glow faintly, not with aurora borealis, but with a cold internal light, like submerged lightning. It illuminated fleeting, impossible shapes within the dense ice, shapes that defied geological formation, forms that seemed to shift and writhe just beyond perception. It was a dance of impossible shadows, a silent, grotesque ballet. The very air around me seemed to thicken, becoming viscous, making movement difficult, as if I pushed through unseen jelly. The temperature dropped sharply, not naturally, but a sudden biting cold that emanated from the ground, piercing my thickest clothing layers. Then the darkness hit. It was not polar night's gradual descent, but something else. The sky, moments before filled with twilight hues, ripped open, not with thunder and lightning, but with an impossible, instantaneous blackness. It was as if a vast, unseen hand extinguished the stars, plunging the world into a blackness so profound it felt like a physical presence. It pressed on my camp, on me, a suffocating blanket of non-light, a literal absence of existence. The wind shrieked, a sound less like rushing air and more like 1,000 tormented voices screaming in unison, tearing at the ice, whipping snow into a frantic, chaotic frenzy. It was a cacophony of unseen agony, a symphony of despair, the cries of the lost echoing from an impossible distance, yet right beside me. My satellite phone, my lifeline, shrieked. Deafening white noise drowned out all thought. A piercing screech tore at my eardrums. Then it died completely, leaving a terrifying absolute silence. It was worse than the noise. A void of sound, a perfect, terrifying emptiness. My headlamp beam, usually a steady beacon, flickered wildly. It cast grotesque, dancing shadows that writhed on the ice, mimicking grotesque figures. I was blind, deaf, and utterly adrift in a maelstrom of impossible physics, a pocket of chaos ripped from reality's fabric, a place where nature's laws simply ceased to exist. It was replaced by something ancient and malevolent, something defying all human understanding, something that warped existence itself. Through the chaos, through invisible ice spray and roaring wind, I saw it. Not a solid object, not a creature, but a distortion. The ice, the snow, the very air seemed to tear open, revealing a gaping void. It wasn't black. Black is merely light's absence. This was an absence of everything, a profound nothingness that seemed to drink photons from the air, leaving behind an inky, consuming darkness, a literal hole in existence, a portal to oblivion, a gateway to a realm beyond human comprehension. It shimmered with an impossible, profound cold, a paradox that defied all understanding, twisting light around bending photons, creating a swirling vortex of warped reality, a maelstrom of non-existence, a black hole in the fabric of the cosmos, a wound in the universe itself, bleeding into my world. From within this void, the hum intensified to a deafening roar, a physical pressure that threatened to crush my skull, to implode my very being, to reduce me to a screaming, formless mass of terror. And then, I felt it, a presence. Not a physical touch, but a psychic intrusion, a cold, probing tendril that reached into my mind, bypassing my defenses, burrowing deep into my consciousness. It touched the raw nerves of my soul, exploring my deepest fears, my most cherished memories. It was ancient, immense, and utterly malevolent. It wasn't trying to kill me quickly. It was trying to understand me, to absorb me, to make me part of its endless silent scream, to add my consciousness to its terrifying chorus. It was the ice itself, a living, hungry entity, a cosmic predator. A force that had shaped the very poles and carved the glaciers. Now it sought to shape me, to remake me in its own image, to make me a part of its eternal, agonizing existence. The psychic intrusion intensified. It became a torrent of alien thoughts and fragmented images that flooded my mind, overwhelming my senses. I saw glimpses of impossible geometries, structures that defied Euclidean space, vast, swirling constructs of light and shadow that existed in a realm beyond human perception. I felt the collective agony of countless lost explorers' vanished expeditions, their fear, their despair, their final moments of comprehension as they were consumed. All compressed into a single, overwhelming wave of suffering that threatened to drown me. I saw glimpses of distorted human forms, suspended in an eternal, silent maelstrom within the void. Their ghostly figures slowly dissolving, their consciousnesses being assimilated, their identities erased, becoming part of the hum. Their individual screams added to the collective torment. Their faces contorted in silent agony, flickered in and out of my vision, their eyes wide and pleading, yet utterly devoid of hope. I felt the entity's hunger. It was a vast, insatiable emptiness. It sought to consume all light, all life, all existence, to expand its own being through the absorption of others. It was a primal, terrifying hunger. It resonated with dark, ancient power, a force that existed since before the universe, before time. It showed me its collection, not as objects, but as echoes, as fragments of consciousness suspended within its vast internal landscape. Each was a tiny, screaming note in its endless symphony. And I felt the terrifying pull to surrender, to let go, to become one with the endless quiet, to join the collective, to find peace in oblivion. It was a seductive, horrifying siren song. It promised an end to the torment, an end to the fear, an end to Aris Thorne, a final, blissful nothingness. I don't know how long I was trapped. Minutes, hours, days. Time lost all meaning. It dissolved into chaos. I became another victim of the void's temporal distortions. My mind screamed for answers, for logic, for any shred of sanity. But there were no answers, only the terrifying, consuming void. Its presence was a crushing weight on my soul, a suffocating blanket of despair. I pressed myself against the frozen ground. My body was battered by unseen forces, bruised and aching. My muscles screamed, threatening to tear from my bones. I fought with every ounce of strength, not against the storm, but against the insidious pull of the void, against the psychic intrusion that sought to unravel my being, to strip away my identity, to reduce me to a raw, screaming nerve, a mere echo in its vastness. Then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. The void snapped shut like a monstrous eye closing. It left only the lingering chill. The impossible darkness vanished. The wind died to a whisper. The ice stood still. The sun impossibly was high in the sky, shining down on a calm, quiet expanse. It was as if nothing had happened, as if the nightmare was a mere hallucination, a figment of my tortured mind, a cruel trick of the light. My camp was intact. My tent stood. My gear was scattered but present. I was alive. But something had fundamentally changed. A piece of my sanity, a piece of my soul had been left behind in that void. It was a sacrifice to its hunger, a price paid for forbidden knowledge. And a piece of the void, I would soon learn, had followed me out. It was a parasitic attachment, a chilling souvenir, a permanent stain on my existence, a fragment of its endless hunger, now residing within me, a constant, gnawing presence. My rescue was a blur. Days later, a search party found me. I was slumped against an ice ridge, hypothermic and delirious. My eyes were wide and fixed. I repeated fragmented phrases about the hum and the void. My voice was hoarse and broken, barely a whisper. The rescue team looked at me with pity and unease. Their faces reflected unspoken questions. The station investigation was thorough but fruitless. They found no evidence of a storm of that magnitude, no logical explanation for my state. I gave them a sanitized version, a sudden, severe blizzard, equipment failure, extreme hypothermia, anything to avoid the truth, anything to make it sound plausible, to fit within their understanding. Who would believe the truth? They chalked it up to trauma, the psychological toll of a near-death experience, a convenient label for the incomprehensible, a way to dismiss what they couldn't understand, to file it away and forget. I was discharged from the hospital, physically recovered, but mentally a shattered man, a shell of my former self. Haunted, forever marked. The doctors prescribed sedatives, therapy, and rest. They said I would recover. They were wrong. I returned to my small apartment, a place that once felt like a sanctuary, now a cage. The initial relief of survival quickly curdled into profound, gnawing unease. The hum, that pervasive bone-deep vibration, had followed me. It was faint at first, easily dismissed as building pipes settling or distant traffic, a trick of the mind. But it was always there, a low thrum that resonated in my teeth, a constant reminder of the void, a persistent whisper in the background of my life, a constant, low-level torment that gnawed at my sanity. Then came the cold spots, unnatural pockets of biting chill. They appeared in specific areas of my apartment, even with the heating full. The hairs on my arms stood on end. Goosebumps rose on my skin. It was a cold that felt alien and alive. They moved, shifting from the living room corner to the foot of my bed, from the kitchen to the bathroom, a mobile pocket of unnatural cold that defied all logic and thermodynamics. I'd wrapped myself in blankets, but the cold was internal, a profound chill that emanated from within me, from my very core. It was a cold no external warmth could dispel, a cold that seeped into my soul, freezing marrow. My senses began to distort. Water, hot from the tap, always felt too cold, like the void's frigid depths, a chilling reminder of its embrace, a constant phantom chill on my skin. Sounds seemed muffled, as if I was underwater, a constant pressure on my eardrums, a dull ache behind my eyes, a sense of being submerged even on dry land. Colors in my apartment, once vibrant, now appeared muted, faded, as if a thin gray veil covered reality, dulling the world, draining its life, stripping joy. Electronics malfunctioned when I was near. Lights flickered erratically. My old radio burst into static. My phone lost signal in my own home, even fully charged. It was as if my presence, or whatever latched onto me, interfered with reality, disrupting energy flow. It was a constant reminder of its power, its disruptive influence. Small objects shifted inexplicably. Keys moved from hook to table. Books fell from shelves. No one was near. Doors, closed moments before, were slightly ajar. It was a silent, mocking gesture, a subtle violation of my space, a constant reminder I was not alone. It was subtle, easily dismissed as forgetfulness, but its consistency chipped at my sanity, a slow, methodical erosion. My grip on reality slipped, leaving me teetering on madness's brink, questioning every perception. The presence became more defined. It wasn't physical, but a feeling of being watched, constantly, relentlessly, from every shadow, from every corner of my vision. I'd catch peripheral glimpses of shimmering air like heat haze, but cold, twisting beyond my sight. It was a fleeting distortion, a glimpse of the impossible, a hint of something vast, incomprehensible. Shadows in my apartment moved unnaturally, elongating, twisting into impossible shapes when I wasn't looking directly. They danced at vision's edges, mocking my attempts to ignore, to rationalize. Auditory anomalies escalated. Not direct speech, but sounds implying communication or mimicry. I'd hear distorted echoes of my own voice, phrases I just thought, twisted and drawn out, a chilling mockery, a violation of my inner thoughts, a perverse echo of my own mind. Phantom creaks of unseen ice, the groan of stressed metal, sounds of deep water churning, all from my apartment walls, from the floorboards, from the empty air. It was the ice manifesting piece by agonizing piece in my home. It was recreating its horrors, turning my safe haven into a smaller prison, a microcosm of the void. I tried to fight it. I installed cameras, hoping for proof to show someone, anyone. But the footage was corrupted, static blur, impossible distortions, or blank during activity, as if the entity erased its presence, defying capture, defying documentation. I used thermometers for cold spots. Readings dropped only when I wasn't looking or fluctuated wildly. Defying logic, defying physics, mocking my instruments, rendering them useless. I sought help, therapists, psychiatrists. They listened, prescribed sedatives, diagnosed severe PTSD, paranoia, delusions. They said it was Arctic trauma. My mind struggled, hallucinations, all in my head. A convenient dismissal. I knew they were wrong. I was not just traumatized, I was infected. The entity's nature slowly became clearer, not by understanding, but by horrifying experience. It wasn't a ghost, not an animal. It was something else. Ancient, non-corporeal, a distortion of reality, a fragment of the Arctic's true essence. It latched onto me, a parasitic connection. It wasn't trying to kill me fast. It tried to absorb me, to drag me back into its reality, to make me part of itself, to consume my consciousness, my memories, my identity, adding my essence to its hum, to its terrifying chorus. It fed on my fear, on my deteriorating sanity, growing stronger with every terror. Every sleepless night, every chilling whisper, every flicker of sanity, every shred of my former self. It was a slow, agonizing consumption, a living death, a prolonged torment, no end, only assimilation. The climax came one night. The hum became deafening. My apartment felt like a collapsing ice cave, battered by unseen forces, walls groaning, air shimmered with impossible cold, walls seemed to breathe, distorting inwards, bending, twisting, like frozen water, their structure unraveled, dissolving into pervasive chill. Whispers were no longer indistinct. They were a chorus of tormented voices, pressing in, breaking my mind's last vestiges, a cacophony of agony, a symphony of despair, a chorus of the damned. The floor beneath me began to heave, mimicking the ice's impossible tremors, threatening to throw me, to swallow me, to drag me down into its depths, into the waiting void. My furniture groaned, twisting, trying to reconfigure into jagged ice shards. Wood cracked, metal shrieked, a perverse recreation of the Arctic's embrace. The void, absence of everything, formed in my living room, a swirling vortex of profound darkness, pulling light, pulling air, pulling me. It wanted me back, to complete absorption, to claim its prize, the piece it left behind, the piece of me it craved, the final, agonizing step. In its consumption, I fought back, desperation born of pure terror. I screamed, not in fear, but in defiance, a raw, guttural sound. It tore my throat, a desperate cry, against the darkness, against the impossible, against existence itself. I grabbed objects, threw them at the void, futile gestures, against an incorporeal enemy, a force defying physics, mocking my existence, rendering my efforts meaningless. I knew I couldn't escape, only live with it, or fight, until it won. I had to sever the connection or weaken it. I focused on memories, solid ground, sunlight, the world outside the Arctic. I clung to warmth, to life, individuality, sanity, every anchor to reality, every shred of my former self, every precious memory, every moment of joy. I pushed back against the cold, against the hum, against the whispers, with every fiber, every ounce of will, every desperate heartbeat. It was a battle for my soul, for my existence, a fight to remain myself, to hold on to the last fragments of who I was, to deny the void its victory, to remain human, to remain Aris Thorne, even if only a shadow. I survived that night, barely. The void receded, the hum faded to its usual thrum, cold spots retreated, but I am forever changed. A survivor, yes, but a prisoner. The something is still with me, a constant, chilling companion, a piece of the Arctic, tethered to my existence. I live with the hum, cold spots, flickering lights, muffled sounds. I am a living testament to the Arctic's true nature, a walking anomaly. Living proof, some disappearances are not vanishings, they are absorptions. Sometimes the abyss stares back, sometimes it follows you home. I was an Arctic researcher in 2005, but the ice wasn't the only thing that froze my blood. Something else was there, still is, still hungry, still waiting for my guard to drop, for my sanity to slip, for me to surrender. And I know with chilling certainty it will come. It will come for me again, next time. I might not be strong enough. Next time, I might become just another whisper, another lost soul, another piece of the Arctic. The ice calls to me, in my dreams. A vast dark expanse, filled with the hum, filled with the lost. One day I know, I will answer. The pull grows stronger, a subtle tug, a whisper, promising an end to torment, a final, terrifying peace. I feel damp earth beneath me, even in sleep. There's a vibration under my feet. I see the inky blackness. I hear the chorus of the consumed. Their voices are clearer now, beckoning. I am a ticking clock, counting down to my inevitable disappearance. The Arctic will have its due.